That would be really weird if I did that. Well, I can do it. I'll just do that to my dad. The thing is, he turned around and emailed it. Whenever you're actually funny, if I just give it to my dad, I'd be like, what? My siblings? So
you're making yeah, yell at him. He's never worked up the actual. That's not gonna work. Hey, you fuckers!
or several.
Especially if he's. Yeah, I got it. Take the phone. Oh, yes.
All right, guys, welcome for one of our first speakers. So, and more people will probably be pouring in. So, we'll try to keep it going down. And how do you see your last name today? Stricker. Ken Stricker on the seen and unseen, and he's going to be talking a lot about visuals and different types of technology. I'm assuming that's associated with different types of imagery. So, again, Ken Stricker, enjoy.
Again, I'm going to be doing a talk, seen and the unseen. We're going to start with the visible spectrum, then we're going to work out into ultraviolet, infrared, and how a lot of that applies to a lot of the things we do in the paranormal field. Now, if any of you happen to have the wonderful laser grid pens that Ghost Stock sells, and if you do not know, if you untwist the end of it, it becomes a great laser pointer. What you also may not know is if you manipulate the battery case just right, you get it? And exactly a different color. It was an attempt. Anyway, like I said, I am Ken Stricker. I have 35 years systems and software engineering experience in the aerospace industry, working with military infrared systems and simulations. 21 years experience working at Halloween Horror Nights at Universal Studios. This year I will also be joined by Sean and Paul. Paul doesn't know where he's going to be yet. I'm really not supposed to tell you where I work. It's one of the things my company doesn't like me to do. So for the sake of this conference, we'll just say I work at Stark Industries. I am IR man. At least I didn't have the music. All right, we're going to start out with the visible spectrum. Visible spectrum. The visible spectrum is what we can see. The normal red, orange, green, yellow, blue, indigo, violet colors of the rainbow that our eyes are able to see and process. That's the official definition of it. We process visual information through the human eye. The eye works much as a camera. The image we see is inverted on the back of the eye, on the retina. Comes through the cornea, the lens, and then the impulses are carried along the optic nerve. I know this is very dull and boring for this time of night. I promise we'll tie in. Most of the refraction of the light is done by the cornea. That does most of the bending of the light to aim it towards the back of the eye. The smaller part of it is done by the lens, but the lens can actually change its shape to refocus that energy to the back of the eye. The fact that the cornea does most of the bending is why RK surgery and laser surgery is so effective on the eye, because manipulating the cornea has a great effect on how that light focuses. On the back of the eye, we have the retina. There are two types of receptors in your eye, the rods and the cones. Rods are more numerous and are more light sensitive than cones, but they are not sensitive to color. They're strictly black and white. There are 6 to 7 million cones in the eye, and they provide color sensitivity. Rods and cones are not evenly distributed in the eye. Most of your color vision is right within plus or minus 20 degrees of the center of your eye. Outside of that is mostly rods. There are no rods at all right at the center of your eye. This will become more important as we go on. Rods are responsible for your night vision and your motion detection. Most of your motion detection is in the periphery of your eye. So if you ever see something out of the corner of your eye at night, absolute worst thing you can do is look straight at it, because you lose a lot of your motion detection in the center of your eye. If you can kind of maintain it in the peripheral, then you'll be able to maintain that motion longer. We have red, green, and blue cones that are responsible for our color vision. Green and red are packed in the center, and the blue are outside the center. They have the highest sensitivity, but our highest color sensitivity is actually in green. If you look at where the red and green cones lie, this whole center green spectrum is where a lot of your sensitivity is. That's why when you see night vision goggles, night vision systems, the screens will usually be in green, because we're most sensitive to the most gradients of color in that band. It's also the reason you should never stare into a green laser pointer, because if you destroy that portion of your vision, you are losing a major part of your visual spectrum. That's interesting, but more importantly to us are the rods. The rods are the paranormal investigator's best friend. This is your night vision. This is your motion vision. They are the most numerous photoreceptors in your eye. There's about 120 million of them in your eye. Someone made an estimate at one point, if your eye were a camera, it would be approximately 582 megapixels. That's almost half a gigapixel. The rods are not sensitive to color. They're responsible for our night vision. They're incredibly sensitive. They're more than 1,000 times sensitive than the cones. Night vision based. There are better motion sensors, and this comes from heredity. Seeing things as they're approaching out of the corner of your eye is very important if you have predators. We've maintained that all the way to today, so you see motion better out of the peripheral of your vision. Dim object in your peripheral vision may disappear when you look directly at it, due to moving the image onto the cone-rich center of the eye. One other very interesting fact about the rods that is very important to us as paranormal investigators. It takes the rods in your eye about 30 to 45 minutes to adapt to darkness. Now, if you're doing an investigation, you're in the dark, your eyes are adjusted, you bring up your your camera with a viewfinder, you put that camera back down, and suddenly you can't see again. There is an alternative because rods do not see red. You ever watched one of those movies where they're on the bridge of a ship and they're looking through the window and all the lighting on the bridge is red? The reason for that is that red light does not affect the rods in your eye. You still maintain that color vision. So one of the things that you can do, get yourself some red gel and put that in the back of your infrared cameras so that now you have a red background rather than a white background, and you'll maintain that dark night vision. You can also take your flashlights. A lot of the flashlights you'll get come with a red setting, so you have a red beam. That's very good to use if you want to maintain your night vision. You turn that white beam on, even for a few seconds, the rods are going to saturate. It's going to take you 20 to 30 minutes to get accustomed to the dark again. Another thing I picked up that could be very useful, red sunglasses. If you do have to go out of that dark area into a light area, maybe transitioning between two investigation areas, get a pair of red sunglasses. Block out everything but the red light so your rods can stay adjusted to the dark. Some of the common light sources are not white light. Sunlight is pretty evenly spread across the spectrum. Mercury vapor lamps are very much in the green portion of the spectrum. White LED is actually shifted more to the blue. A barcode scanning laser is down here in the red. Animals don't see light the same way we do. For a long time it was thought that animals only saw black and white. That's actually not true. Animals do see in color, but not quite as well as we do. The top bar is how a human would see the spectrum. The bottom bar is more how a dog would interpret that same spectrum. They don't have the reds that we do. Their vision is more down in the blue, and they're saying more and more that a lot of animals can see further into the ultraviolet spectrum than we do, which is why cats react to things that we may or may not see. Your digital cameras. Most digital cameras natively have a sensitivity that extends well up into the infrared. This is intentionally filtered out within the camera to give you just the visible light spectrum. That's how we can use digital cameras as infrared cameras by negating that filter. And this is just an RGB curve of a Nikon D700 spectrum. And you can see it runs all the way out to the 950 band, which is well out into infrared. 700 right about there is the end of the visible spectrum. Everyone's heard the speed of light. Speed of light is the c in E equals mc squared. Universal constant. So 299,792,485 meters per second in a vacuum. Now, as a bonus question, the speed of sound at sea level is 340.29 meters per second. Who wants to guess at what the speed of sound is in a vacuum?
Same thing.
Speed of light.
Speed of light. Speed of light? Actually, you're both wrong. Sound cannot exist in a vacuum. Sound is a pressure wave. In a vacuum, it doesn't exist. In space, no one can hear you scream. All right, so the speed of light is a universal constant. That's right. You know, Einstein's theory is based on c being a universal constant. It moves at a constant speed. Unless you can freeze light. A couple of researchers used a laser and a crystal, much like an LCD crystal. They shot one laser at the crystal that made the crystal transparent. They shot a second laser through that same crystal and turned the first laser off. 2 seconds later, or 1 minute later, excuse me, they turned the first laser back on and detected the residual from that second laser out the other end of the laser beam. So they were able to freeze the photons within that crystal for 1 entire minute and release those photons, and they came out the other side of the crystal. So far we've been talking about the visible light spectrum. That's it there. The one that you learned in high school physics as Roy-G-Duv, red, orange, yellow, green, with blue, indigo, violet. They didn't put cyan in there. So now we're going to talk about the ultraviolet end of the spectrum. This is kind of a fun light. We don't use it a lot in the paranormal. It's used a lot in the entertainment field. There are multiple ultraviolet bands. I think you've all heard of UVA, UVB. If you watch any of the suntan lotion ads, they talk about the UVA, UVB. There are multiple bands of ultraviolet. UVA is the closest to visible light. That's the one that you'll find in black lights, and then UVB moves on down the spectrum. Like I said, black lights are UVA. It emits a long-wave UVA radiation. Fluorescent black lights use a phosphor on the inner tube. Some use what's called Wood's glass to produce that. The incandescent bulb black lights really don't do anything. Those are not very efficient. They only put out about 0.1% of the power. And then there are mercury vapor black lights. Then we also have ultraviolet LEDs. LEDs that can be manufactured to output light in the ultraviolet range. The efficiency decreases as you get further up in the waveband. And a lot of these are used for digital print, for curing different types of solvents, etc. How many of you go on to the dentist and they put that gun in your mouth to dry your filling? That's a UV light. Shortwave UV lamps can be made by using a fluorescent lamp tube with no phosphor coating. The fluorescent lights in this room are producing UVC light. The only reason we see it as visible light is those tubes have a coating internally of a phosphor that absorbs the UV light, and it excites them to produce a visible light. These UVC type lamps are used as germicidal lamps. I happen to have one of these. You don't want to look into this because it's really not good for your eyes, so I won't turn it on. This can be used, to run over a surface. It will kill germs. If you see some of the water purification systems that they claim to be UV, it's the same type of UV light, and it is actually effective. So beneficial effects of UV light. UVB produces vitamin D in the skin. This is where you would you produce the lack of vitamin D is what led to scurvy in people on ships who stayed underneath the ship for long periods of time. The amount of brown pigment in the skin increases after exposure to UV radiation, also known as suntan. And UVA light is also used in crime scene analysis. You've seen on CSI where they spray the luminol and shine black light. That's UV or UVB or UVA. Some of the harmful effects of ultraviolet radiation. You can have chronic harmful skin effects. Eye is most sensitive to damage in UV in the lower bands. It's usually absent from sunlight, but it's something that's found like in the welder. When someone's welding, you know, they always have the dark helmet on. It's the UV light from that damages the eye. Mountaineers get a higher level of UV radiation because there's less atmospheric filtering. Most of the UV radiation is filtered out through our atmosphere. Glasses give UV protection. I can actually show you with a pair of safety glasses here. I can find my highlighter. There we go. My highlighter. And these are some UV safety glasses. If I put the highlighter down on the desk and shine my UV light on it, you can see how reactive that is. If I shine it through the glasses at it, it's completely filtered out. So these will filter out the UV light. What it won't do is if I shine the UV light on that and look through the marker with these glasses, I still see the glow on the marker because it's actually being converted from ultraviolet into visible light. So, and again, some UV applications according to waveband. Ultraviolet lithography, ID tracking, optical sensors, disinfection, down to, in the lower band, bug zappers. Bugs are very attracted to UV light. Then you have the curing of polymers, which is what you use in dentistry. UV is also used quite a bit in forensics. It's used as investigating crime scenes because a lot of your bodily fluids will rest under ultraviolet. If you want to borrow my ultraviolet light and take it up to your room and shine it around the room, you might be surprised. There are a lot of things that will react to ultraviolet light and produce visible light. You saw the marker I had. Most polymers will react to ultraviolet light. So if I shine the light through here, it's not quite as visible in a bright room, but you can kind of see the green haze that develops within the polymer. That's the ultraviolet light affecting. And there are a lot of minerals that are affected by ultraviolet light. This is a whole case full of different minerals that under regular light are just normal gray rocks, but you put them under ultraviolet light and you get all the coloring. So now we'll step over to the other end of the spectrum. We've been talking about the ultraviolet side. Now the side that is much more useful in our line of work, and that's the infrared. There are multiple infrared bands. And first, here's the dictionary definition of infrared. We'll go past that. We have near IR, which is what we use for infrared cameras. Near IR, if I pick up the right laser point, near IR behaves more like visible light than the other bands of IR. It's a reflective. You have to have a light source to be able to see things. Shortwave IR is not used quite a bit because there's a lot of atmospheric absorption in shortwave IR. Midwave is used a lot in sensor systems. Midwave IR picks up more heated gases and things at much higher temperatures. Longwave IR is a thermal imaging reason. This will pick up things that are just slightly above body temperature. So if you're looking at an aircraft flying in midwave IR, you'll mostly see the plume coming from the engines, whereas in long-wave IR, you'll actually see the heating of the skin due to the friction of the air. Near IR uses, in the 800 nanometer range is medical treatment, 830 automated card readers. We're mostly interested in the 840 band and around the 840 band because that's where most of the infrared video cameras operate. But also up in the 940, your television remote controls use infrared. So there are more in 940, so the LEDs, if you're going to go build an infrared light, don't go tearing apart your remotes because you're really not going to get a lot out of that. And the reason being, going back to our digital camera sensitivity, here's the 840 band, and you can see we have about a 60% transmission sensitivity in the 840. If you go out to the 940, you've dropped down to about 30. So you've got about half the sensitivity, so you need twice the LEDs to produce the same amount of illumination. Did talk about nanometers for a second. The way you measure the radiant intensity of IR light is in what's called watts per steradian. Steradian is a unit of measure. Can also be talked about in terms of irradiance, which is the amount of power per square meter. That's used less, or the time it's per unit area. IR LEDs are rated in milliwatts per centimeter squared or milliwatts per steradian. You have the standard LEDs. There are surface mount LEDs. You have the big heatsink type LEDs. These generally draw in the 1 amp range, so they're going to eat your battery really quick. And of course, we have all the LEDs on Ghost Stop's wonderful line of creepy hollow lights. Viewing angles on the LEDs can range anywhere from a 4-degree output to a 240-degree output. Typical outputs from a 0.3 milliwatt up to a 20 milliwatt. These would be the 20 milliwatt ones, and like I said, they draw a lot of power. Talk a little bit about emissive versus reflective light. Emissive light is the ability to emit matter or energy. Reflective, capable of reflecting light. In this picture, you see both. The bulb is an emitter. The surface you're seeing is a reflector. Very much the same with IR LEDs. When you have an IR camera, you are projecting the light onto the surface. It's reflecting back, and what you're getting is the reflection of that LED light.
Does the caustic have any value to that, of how the light shines through an object and the shadow it produces? Let's say you can watch light through that water bottle, and your eye is going to receive that light as something. And I was always introduced in 3D modeling when I have to add artificial light into a scene. And it's very much so like this. And I've always wondered, does that that emitter, that light that's emitting light, shines onto the surface of an object.
Right.
And the further out you go, the spectrum of light changes in color as you go out.
That's due to refraction, not reflection. Refraction
Right.
is actually the bending of light
Bending
through a
of light.
surface.
Okay.
I didn't really go into that in here, but we can. When you take a prism and you put it down and shine light through it, and you get the rainbow out of the other side, it's because each wavelength of light bends a little differently as it passes through that light surface. And it will bend through the surface. Different materials produce different amounts of that bend, but it will change the path of the light. If you're looking into the water and you see a fish in the water and you think, oh, he's right there, he's not really right there. It's because the light has been bent. He's actually further down than you think he is. So that's light refraction, which really didn't go into in this, but it is a valid point. Midwave IR. It's wavelengths of 3 to 8 micrometers. Detects only temperatures quite a bit above body temperature. It's used in missile seekers, FLIR systems, astronomy. And like I said, it's picking up more things that are warmed by, hot gases, hot dust, etc. You get into long wave IR, 8 to 15. These sensors can obtain a passive image of an object only slightly higher than body temperature. So a jet aircraft moving through the air, because the air is heating the skin of that aircraft, you'll be able to see it with a long wave IR system. Some of the weather satellites can detect, based on cloud temperatures, the height of clouds and movement. That's typically in the range of 10.3 to 12.5. Some of the uses of infrared, of course, night vision we're all familiar with, thermography, hyperspectral imaging, tracking systems, missile systems, aircraft systems. Infrared is used for heating, infrared heat lamps.
What about sound? Can you do sound through infrared?
You can convert sound into pulses and transmit it using infrared. You're not actually sending the sound. It's kind of like what you do when you take a sound signal and turn it into electrical. You're either changing the frequency or the amplitude of that wave in order to produce that sound.
But you can still send sound through it.
You can send just about anything through it. If you look at fiber optic cable, fiber optic cable uses light to send digital information. You can convert sound into digital and send it across a fiber optic cable. So you can send sound, but you have to have something to translate it into a light signal. And then at the other end, something to retranslate it back into sound. Infrared is also used in art conservation. You can use infrared to see behind the current layer of a painting. It can reveal things that you can't see with the human eye.
That's how they determined some of the old canvases have paintings, because canvas was so expensive back then.
They would just paint over it.
Right over it.
Also, documents that have been erased. You can actually look at them under certain wavelengths of light and see what has been erased and written over. I talked a little about the short waves and why we don't use it as much. This is a graph of the atmospheric absorption of infrared light. You can see down here in the short wave, you have pretty good propagation. You get down here, and then there's this trough in the midwave where water vapor essentially takes out that entire band of light. It cannot travel. Water vapor will essentially absorb that band of light. Then you get back out into the long wave, and you have quite a bit of bandwidth there. Just a quick thing on wavelength versus frequency. Wavelength is physically the length from the start of one wave to the start of the next. Frequency is how often that wave occurs. Frequency in sound is different than frequency in light, because light moves at a faster speed. So with the same wavelength, the light will have a much higher frequency because it's moving much faster. So that point is moving by much faster than with sound. And just to give a little bit of perspective of the size of different wavelengths, if you look down here in the visible spectrum, the wavelength of light in the visible spectrum, the distance from one peak to the next, or the start of one wave to the start of the next, is about the size of a protozoa. So a single cell creature. As you move down into the ultraviolet, as the wavelength gets shorter, you're down to the size of a molecule. X-rays down to about the size of an atom. And then the gamma rays are the size of a nuclei. Moving down the other way, our infrared light is about the size of the point on a needle, is the wavelength. Microwaves are butterflies. And then as you move further out in the microwave scale and get down here into radio waves, then you're the size of buildings. So the sound you're listening to, the length of that wave, the sound you're listening to on your radio, the length of the wave to get that to you is as big as a building.
So is that like if you're standing on one side of a lake and somebody hits an object on the other side of the lake, you see them hit that object, but then you wait for the sound to...
That's the difference in the speed of sound versus the speed of light. Because light travels so much faster, the image is going to get to you long before the sound does. It's like 1.6, 1 times 10 to the 6th difference between light and sound.
So the closer you go across the lake, the more you'll see
the more you'll see them at the same time. The same reason why you see the flash of lightning and then you hear the thunder. You can, rule of thumb, see the flash of light, start counting how many seconds you get is approximately how many miles away it is.
Or an after photographs.
Yeah. I just have a couple more slides, just a couple of videos. The first one, this is an infrared image taken by a geostationary weather satellite, and it covers not quite 30 days worth of a weather pattern over the Earth. And I don't have the entire thing here. I won't run through the whole thing because it would take quite a while. This is what the Earth looks like over about 30 days, what the infrared images of the water vapor in the atmosphere. That's not all cloud cover, that's just water vapor in the atmosphere.
What are we missing out there?
And then
Fantastic.
one other video. This is actually video from a sniper pod, which is mounted on an F-16 aircraft. And they start out in this approximately 11 miles away from what they're looking at. And then the second part of it, oops, hit the right button. Questions will be next.
Take a look out here. Here's what it looks like normally.
This is the wide angle, or wide field of view. That's narrow field of view. This is 11 miles away. And this is on a moving aircraft. Just let this run.
That far out?
Yeah. And in just a second, it'll switch over to where they're actually following another F-16, and they have the tracking enabled. So while this runs, does anyone have any questions? Put everyone to sleep. Yeah, here they are. This is one jet aircraft tracking another jet aircraft.
The tracking exhaust. Sorry, the tracking exhaust.
Yeah. Basically, the pilot can pick any point at any temperature gradient, and it will stay on that point, whether it's a hot point or a cold point. But if you've ever tried to film something from a moving car, you can tell the stability there.
Or we shoot folk shots from like that.
So, any questions?
Yeah.
How does this infrared help you see things on investigations that cannot be seen with the naked eye?
She's a plant.
No. I can, no.
Yeah.
You wait your turn.
What the infrared does is it's a light band above what we can normally see. It picks up the infrared camera picks up different energy levels than what our eyes can see. Whether we pick up shadows, we pick up movement, we're not interfering with that scene with visible light and all the shadows involved in that. It's a very controlled environment as far as light's concerned. The only light we're really interested in seeing is the light that we're producing. Anyone else?
Very good.
What is your quest? What is the SP plus deal?